So this is going to be the first of a few videos just going through how to run the ANOVA, particularly focused on when you get an interaction, a couple of different ways that you can break it up. Okay, so this is just a 2x2 ANOVA, and this is where we break up interactions. Okay, so the design that we've got is a 2x3 factorial design. First IV is license, 3 levels there. P1, P2, P3, and the other IV is gender, male versus female. And the DV is moderately risky driving behaviours, and this comes from the data set that we've worked on in the tutes for the young drivers. Okay, always analysis is driven by hypotheses, and the hypotheses are here. So you've got those in the workbook. You can read down through them. I'm not going to take the time here to read them out. Couple of crucial things. Hypothesis 1 and Hypothesis 2 are talking about differences between men and women. Hypothesis 1, women with more than 3 years will report less risky driving than men at that same level of license. Hypothesis 2, men and women with less than 1 year, so P1s, at that level, men and women don't differ. Okay, so those first two hypotheses are about comparing men and women. Okay, the next three hypotheses do a different comparison. So hypothesis 3, level of driving experience, so license level, makes no difference to risky driving for men. But for women in Hypothesis 4 and Hypothesis 5, there are differences amongst women across license groups. So the first two hypotheses compare gender, one at one level of license, the other at a different level of license. The next set of hypotheses, 3, 4, and 5, compare license level. That's a really good distinction to make when you're going through your hypotheses. It's also a good way to structure your hypotheses, so that you lump together hypotheses that are comparing across the same IV, and then move on to hypotheses that compare across a different IV. So my first two compare across gender, men versus women. Second three, comparing levels of license, one in the men, the other different combinations of women. That also leads to some implications. Put those first two hypotheses together. The first one says at the open level of license, men and women will be different, men more risky than women. Hypothesis 2 says at P1, so less than 1 year experience, men and women won't differ. Women are just as risky as men on P1s, but then later on, men are more risky. Because that's a different effective gender for the open license group compared to the P1 group, the effective gender is different at one level of license, open, compared to another level of license, P1. Effective an IV changes across levels of another IV. That says there will be an interaction. And notice there, the interaction is between the two IVs. So I describe that as an interaction between gender and license group. The second set of hypotheses, again, if you add them up, they also predict an interaction. It's the same interaction, gender by license, but for a different reason. The reason here is Hypothesis 3 says the men don't differ across license groups. Hypothesis 4 and 5 describes ways in which women do differ across license groups. So again, here, the effect of one IV, but in this case, license, is different depending on whether you look at the men or the women. For men, no effective license. For women, there is an effective license, and it's fairly complicated in hypotheses 4 and 5. So both sets of hypotheses say we're going to get an interaction. Okay. So then we want to have a look at SPSS and see whether we do get that interaction or not. So here's our SPSS, and it's the young drivers data set. and we go Analyze, General Linear Model, Univariate, because we've got one DV and it's a fully between groups design. So our DV is moderately risky driving behaviour, and our two IVs are license and gender. So over here, always a good idea to get plots. So I'm going to put license there and gender there, add that. Now I'm going to do it the other way, because I don't know which one will be easiest to interpret. I'm just going to generate both of the available plots. Okay, so then we go for options, and we want all of this in there. I'm going to go ahead and tick compare main effects. Not that I particularly need it. All the hypotheses were about parts of an interaction. I'm not really going to be chasing the main effects in this unless I don't get the interaction. But there's an interaction coming. So I tick the usual suspects, descriptives, effect sizes, so I'll get partial eta squared, get observed power. It's good to know about. Homogeneity test will give me Levene's test where I need it. And I say continue to that. So that's all we need there. So rather than click OK, I'm going to click paste because I know I'm going to need the syntax later. So I click paste and I'm going to run that analysis. I really am. Okay, I think I did. There we go. Spss has got it. Says I've run it twice. Because I did. Okay, so between subjects, there's our descriptive statistics because we asked for that. Levene's because we asked for that. It's violated, which is not good. But okay, most important thing here in our test of between subjects effects, I do have a license by gender interaction, which I anticipated. Okay. So all my hypotheses said you should get that interaction. So the way I've run it so far, well, if I go down to the interaction, now the plots are really helpful. Because if I look here, so this is the one where I've got men and women on different lines, and across the horizontal axis is license group. That's a fairly useful way of presenting it. At P1, women are scoring higher than men. At P2, women scoring lower than men. And P3, women scoring much lower than men. As we go across license group, men get riskier, women get less risky. So this has shown me that I do have the interaction that I was expecting. Okay, the next step is going to be to analyze that interaction. And there's a couple of different ways to do it. So I'm going to do each different way in a different video so that they stay nice and short. So that's how to pull apart the hypotheses and see if you've got an interaction hypothesized or not, and to consider how you might go about organizing your analysis. And so far, all we've done is show that we do get an interaction. And we'll come back to another video to see how to pull apart that interaction.